Welcome everyone to VWO webinar. My name is Rahul and I lead product management at VWO. In this webinar, we will talk about how you can truly scale your optimization program at scale with automation. Whenever this topic is spoken about, most people tend to think it is going to be about generating ideas, do better research, etc. But today we will talk about something very different that entirely focuses more on increasing the productivity part of optimization program. A lot of us understand APIs as something that send data from one platform to another. And typically with respect to VWO, we've seen a lot of our customers use APIs to send testing data to an analytics platform or to their BI tools, but we often underutilize the value of API in terms of productivity. Just to share a quick example, most companies out there have optimization teams wherein team members have different responsibilities. For instance, some would be responsible for doing research, and then you'll have developers, designers, and QAs. Now, to coordinate between them, teams often use agile methodologies like running sprints, doing stand-ups, using IT project management tool. But there is a better way to scale optimization program by automating most of these operational works and increasing the productivity tenfolds. So to help you understand the same with an actual case study, we have Gino and Thom from Merkle. So I will let Gino and Thom talk more about their journey of using VWO APIs at Merkle. And please feel free to post your questions, which we'll take at the end of the webinar. Over to you, Gino and Thom.
Hey everyone, my name is Thom. As you can see, I'm a data tech and optimization consultant at Merkle. I've started at Merkle, have been working at Merkle since August 2018. And ever since I've started there, I've helped multiple organizations with doing their optimization programs. I've built experiments, did research, analyzed experiments, and helped clients with the strategy of their optimization programs. That's it in short.
Yes, and hi everyone, I'm Gino. I've been working with Merkle for a little over 2 years now. I do a lot of optimization stuff similar to what Thom described, but I'm also very much invested in marketing technology. And as you'll see in this webinar, the area where these two meet is kind of where our project has originated. We'll get into that later.
Yeah, let's see. So do we need to talk about the questions, the way people can ask their questions? Raoul?
Everybody, please feel free to ask questions during the webinar. You can also post your questions on Twitter with hashtag AskVWO.
So yeah, we're from Merkle. We're a global marketing agency, and we have offices around the globe. As of when you look at Europe, we have offices in Great Britain, in the Netherlands, Spain, Germany, lots of people, but we're actually located in Amsterdam, where we used to be Oogst, and together with our former brothers and sisters, Frogleap, Optima, and Your Social, we've merged into Merkle the Netherlands, and we are still part of the digital marketing agency in the Netherlands, where we service multiple brands and help them with digital analytics as well as optimization programs. And our vision is that we help clients make the right decisions through the use of data and tech. So no more decisions based on opinion, but really focus on making decisions with evidence. We are part of, Gino and I are part of the data tech and optimization team of Merkle Netherlands, where we do a broad number of activities. We collect data, we analyze data, and we orchestrate data using marketing technology. But today we'll focus, of course, on the optimization part. Every consultant that works for us can do many of these things, and I think that's where the idea that we talk about today, the Rover, our automation bot, originates from. So that's a bit of background. And this is our conversion optimization team in the Netherlands. We have 7 at the moment, yeah, we love what we do. So today we'll look at 4 specific topics. We'll look at stakeholder communication. When you do a large optimization program, you have to deal with a lot of stakeholders. So yeah, how do you need to communicate with all these stakeholders, keep them up to date? Second, we'll look at creating actionable alerts. We'll move to the solution that we made to do all the communication with stakeholders, and how we use the VWO API to be able to do that. Third, we'll look at automated quality assessment testing. That's where we explain how we do how we automate some of the quality assessment while doing experiment for companies. And finally, monitoring experiments. Of course, when you run an experiment, you want to monitor the experiment if it's going all right. And we thought of a way to do that, and we'll explain it later. So for now, we'll focus on stakeholder communication, because if you run a large optimization program, we do a large number of tests, and there's many stakeholders involved. And to be able to manage that all right, there's a need for good collaboration. Everyone needs to know what kind of tests are running, which pages are affected by tests, what are the upcoming tests, what is the research that we do, and what was the result of the research. So there's a lot of things that everyone needs to be updated about, and yeah, so you need a good idea of how you are going to do that. So basically, you have 2 teams. You have an optimization team, and you have well, all the stakeholders around you in an organization. When you look at the optimization team, there's of course a developer. There might be an optimization specialist. There might be a UX lead. There might be an analyst who analyzes all the data. So of course that team needs to be updated about all the actions that you do in an optimization program. But also the stakeholders, of course, they need to be updated as well. I mean, you have, for example, a customer service lead who needs to know what kind of experiments are being done. If there's anything going wrong, then a customer service lead needs to know that, so he or she can communicate that with the customer service in case clients or visitors of a website are complaining about a bug or something. So it's not something that happens often, but it helps with accepting optimization within a company. But of course also a CXO, a Chief Experience Officer. It's not someone who is directly involved with testing all the time, but it is definitely someone who needs to be up to date about what's happening, and needs to take actions if he needs to. Yeah, so with all these roles and different demands of information that everyone needs, you need a good idea of how you're gonna update all these people, keep them happy and keep them informed. So one of the frameworks, I'm gonna just skip that one. One of the frameworks that you could use for that is the responsibility assignment metrics. This is a a metrics which we use to define what kind of role everyone has and what kind of responsibilities belong to that role. So if you look at the CXO, it's the Chief Experience Officer who's responsible for all the optimization, all the testing, the optimization, the design, well, basically everything that is related to a customer experience. He doesn't need, he's not the one who does the daily operational activities. He's not the one who builds experiments or who analyzes experiments, but it is someone that needs to be informed, for example. So there's 4 different types of definitions that you can define. So there's responsible, which means someone is actually doing the work. So that might be, for example, a developer that develops experiments, and yeah, who's assigned to do the development of an experiment. Second, you have accountable. That might be someone who makes the final decision and has the ultimate ownership. Well, that might fit the CXO role. Third, you have consultant. Maybe there's always someone who has good advice or who needs to be consultant before you put an experiment live, because it's an important role that must be taken into consideration. Fourth, you have informed. It's for someone who needs to be updated about certain actions within an optimization program, but doesn't need to be involved. Yeah, doesn't need to be consultant, or doesn't need to be working on an activity that's directly related to an optimization program. So it's just someone who needs to know what's happening, and nothing more. So if you have these 4 roles, you can start to assign them to each person within your own team, but also to stakeholders, which makes communicating a lot easier. And while doing that, it's really important to make sure that that you make these notifications or the communication that you make it actionable. So if you do this, then you'll make sure that there won't be too many notifications or communication, because people are only going to get the right information and not all the information. So there won't be too many notifications, there won't be irrelevant notifications, and again, yeah, you should make them actionable if you do them, so people can take action right away and not having to do certain steps. So while doing an optimization program, and you talk about communication with stakeholders, there's a couple of layers of communication which differ on a scope. So you have the long-term communication, which might be a yearly strategy meeting where you decide on what kind of strategy you're going to use in the coming year. And you're gonna see how mature you are and where you're behind. That's a long-term meeting. It's something that you need to do in person, and you're gonna do that every year. Then you have the weekly or quarterly progress checks. It's more in the midterm. It happens a bit more often. Will be a bit more operational, less strategic. The content of those meetings. To define the goal of the activities that you're going to do for the next few weeks or months. Check how everyone is doing on their tasks. So it will be a mix of strategy and operations. And in the short term, you have different activities that are being done in relation to optimization program. And this is where a lot of time is spent on doing these activities. And while we were doing optimization for larger companies, we noticed that a lot of tasks could be automated instead of having to do them manually each time. So if you can automate many of these activities, like monitoring experiments or QAing experiments or checking how many experiments were successful, yeah, life gets a bit more easier, and you'll spend less time doing operational tasks and spend more on the strategy and quality experiments. So yeah, if you've defined for each person what kind of responsibility they have, you can make something like this, where it's very clear who needs to know what, and who needs to be updated about certain actions. So if you look at the slide on the right, the optimization team, there's a lot of people that are actually working on activities, and the UX lead, who is who might be the lead of the optimization program, he's accountable, whereas the others are actually responsible for actually doing tasks. But on the left side, you have people that should be informed or even consultant, because they're further away from the team, but they still need to be updated about certain activities. If an experiment starts, or whether an experiment is performing really bad, it's something that some of these people also need to know and need to take action on. So, but you see that there's a difference in how each person within the team or within the stakeholders needs to be updated. So after you've done this, you really know what kind of communication you need to have and who needs to be updated, and you can start to think about how can we make this easier, instead of having to type to someone, oh yeah, I put this test live. If you have to do that for a lot of experiments, then yeah, it's just it's not necessary. So for one client, we did about 80 or 90 experiments within a year, and at some point we really started to noticing that we could save so much time by automating these kind of communications on a daily level, that we started to think about a solution that could help us. So we started to look at what kind of notifications or kind of communication should we send to which roles, and who needs which roles so needs to receive those messages. So for example, if an experiment has been started, in this case number 250, yeah, who needs to know that? Well, an experiment has been started is something that a lot of people might have to know, depending on their background. Maybe a product manager of a platform needs to know that some kind of experiment is going on, so he doesn't confuse an experiment with a bug or whatever. So there's a lot of people who need it, but if an experiment has been put live and no sessions have been registered, which means no traffic has been coming into an experiment because for some reason you made a mistake with the targeting of an experiment, then it's only relevant for the people that actually can do something about it. So you would send a message to the people that can do something about it, but also a message to the one who's accountable, who's responsible for the whole optimization program, who can chase people to fix these kinds of stuff. So yeah, this kind of planning really helps when defining the communication within an optimization program, and it helped us define the basics of our solution that we made for on how to deal with lots of communication, lots of tests, lots of things that need to be done when you're on a time pressure. So I want to give the word to Gino, who knows everything about the solution that we developed.
Yes, thank you, Tom. Yeah, exactly. So as Tom has been describing, we had kind of thought of a messaging system that would really help us take our CRO program to the next level. So the question then for me was really, how do we bring this to life? How can we make this something that actually works? And the thing that we came up with was Rover. Oh, if I can just, yes, there we go. So what is Rover? Basically, the diagram you see here is what's actually behind it. But basically, Rover is a virtual assistant. He is a chatbot on Slack who is able to mention specific people and broadcast messages. And that was the whole starting point. So VWO has an excellent REST API available, through which a lot of information about campaigns and other things that are relevant to your account are accessible. And Slack also has a very extensive API available through which you can do messaging and then some as well. And that's really where we started. So the use cases that Thom described, for example, messaging people when a test had been published, that was something that that was information that we could retrieve from VWO by periodically checking the API and just retrieving a list of campaigns. And at that point, we could also see what their statuses were. And we were recording these statuses locally. And then whenever that status would change, we would know, okay, this test has been published. We can send out a message. Then it was a matter of connecting up the Slack API and choosing the recipients of the message and what channel and how we would set that up. But with Rover, what I really didn't want to do was to create some sort of boring notification system. These are messages that are rather important, but they can get boring to receive continuously. So what we had internally at the time at Merkle, and we still have, was a chatbot that is able to send us notifications on all kinds of things. Birthdays, for example, but also when verification tokens are received. And that bot had a bit of personality. And that's just something that makes it much more fun to interact with. And so what we set out with Rover is we decided to create a dog-like character, because it's a dog that's always barking for your attention. Whenever he sends you a notification, it's because you are required to do something. But it does make it more fun than just a regular scheduled system messages or through email or something like that. And I will get to it later, but we also wanted to make that interactive. And what we see here in the schematic on the right side of the slide is basically a collection of services that had been connected to Rover. So it started out with the VWO API and Slack, but we also connected Google Tag Manager because we have additional tracking set up through there. We have Google Analytics, where information about tests is received. We have Jira, which is a project management platform that contains additional information about tests. And we have IBM's Watson, which makes Rover smart, but I'll get to that. Yeah, so the first system that we really built around Rover was its notifications capability. So whenever something would happen surrounding a test, he would broadcast this to the relevant person. So in the screenshot here, that would be me. So for example, if Thom was the person disabling the test and I would be the one who needed to be informed about this, he could send me a personal message. And this notification system turned out to work so well because it was so difficult as we grew to just keep all the people who were relevant in the loop, that we soon started expanding Rover. And so one such an expansion we did was to add a quiz component to him. And what we see here is information that we had in Jira. So basically we would create a test there and add some background to it, as well as the manipulations that would be applied. And Rover was then able to pull this information directly from Jira and input it into an interactive Slack message through which then multiple people within the organization could compete. So in this case, we have a control and we have a variation, and people could vote on which one they think they will win. What's very interesting about this is that people who are not involved in the optimization program tend to do just as well in predicting, or even better in predicting the outcome than seasoned optimization specialists. So really highlights also the need of having an optimization program. But what's really great about this is that it's a good way to engage with all the relevant people. So it could be people for the organization with which you are actually doing the testing, but also other people who are supporting. And it's just a great way of showing what experiments are live or are about to go live and what is happening here, and just show people who are not really involved with optimization how it works, and really draws them in as well. And so this is also a good starter for people to then start submitting ideas, for example.
Yeah, and
sorry.
if I can add to that, quizzes are great ways of, as Gino said, and making people enthusiastic about optimization programs. But when you make them enthusiastic, they'll also start to generate their own ideas and give them to the optimization team, because they understand that they will soon understand that indeed it's not opinion that should be the decisions shouldn't be made on the basis of opinion, but based on data. And if they start to see that with quizzes that that not everyone gets it right all the time, that there's a lot of randomness in the number of times people get it right, they'll start to support the optimization culture more inside an organization. So it's something very small, but it's very powerful when you apply this inside an organization. So it was really great that Gino could pull this off, and that we had this.
Yeah, it's just really fun that this brings the concepts of optimization really alive to people who only have a vague understanding or no understanding of it. And yeah, so this is a really fun project to work on as well. Another area that we investigated was through the quiz element. There's already some interactivity with Rover, so you have the buttons that you can press, and then that's how you make your vote. But because Rover is a messaging bot, he's sending you very direct messages about what is going on, and sometimes this can be quite actionable. And so if Rover notifies you that a test isn't running well, then it could be very handy that if you have it on your phone, that you can just stop the test straight away on your phone and then find the time to investigate. But that originally wasn't possible. So what we did, we linked IBM's Watson to that. And what Watson allows you to do is set up dialogue flows. And so we can interpret simple requests from the user, and then we can link those to the specific API calls for VWO. And in this case, because we are working with the test IDs, it's very easy to link them together to the relevant ones. An option through the API as well is to receive more information, or if you link that to Jira. But in this case, it really sufficed to have Rover notify you, okay, for test 214, I'm seeing this, and then that you can direct him to do something right away. And there's also some intelligence here that it can use the VWO API to check if a test is already off, for example. So in this case, he would notify you that you try to disable the wrong test. So if you made a typo, it would be easy to fix. And that
yeah,
kind
one of the, oh, yeah, sure, go along.
I just wanted to say that this kind of flows us already into the need to have some quality assurance there, because in the example on the previous slide, it's very easy to make a typo and then do something that you don't necessarily want to happen. And when you are part of a large optimization organization and you run a large number of tests, it's almost unavoidable that things could go wrong. And because of this, you just really want to have strong QA in place. And the thing with that is that it can get cumbersome running QA on a high number of tests. So we wanted to automate as much of this as possible. Thom, anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, yeah, QAing is something that is, especially in the beginning of organizations, of optimization programs, is not done properly. But even if you do it properly, yeah, still mistakes are made, and it costs so much time and money if an experiment has been put live, and after a few weeks you look back and you see that this experiment hasn't been running as you would have expected. Even we experienced, of course, that it's just a bummer if you notice that. So what if we could apply the 4 eyes principle, so which means that every experiment that goes live has been checked by someone else as well, who was not part of making that experiment, goes into testing neutral. What if you could make that a bit easier? And that's, I think, where the next idea came from.
Yeah, so moving on, we have some rules in place that whenever you want to publish a test, it has to adhere to certain conditions. And I don't think those are too difficult to follow, but it's easy to make mistakes, and it's also easy to miss those mistakes. So what we noticed in the VWO API is that we could get just a lot of information that we would always check for anyway. And so we could just write some automated checks on that. And so what we have here as an example is that you could query Rover to examine a specific test before publishing it. And we would just check for these things. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't check for other things manually or anything, but these are very costly mistakes if this is not executed properly. For example, with naming conventions, we have systems in place that work only if the naming convention is correct. So for example, if the wrong test ID would be in the name, that could cause problems. So it's just things like that that are really nice to have. Just an extra layer of security that before publishing, okay, at least these things are all right. And something that we've also built into Rover was that after publishing a test, that he just sends a reminder to the person who's responsible for that test, that they investigate in GA, in VWO, if everything is going as expected. So just to be on the safe side here. So it's easy to miss something, and in this case, Rover is a little helper that makes sure that the experiment is running well. And we took this a bit further as well. So in addition to notifying people of just having to check if there is any problem with a test, we also thought of the idea, what if Rover could do this check himself? What if we're not completely reliant on our own actions anymore in this case, especially with the volume of the tests rising? And so we included the Google Analytics API in the mix. And what it does here, it checks for the events that we have pushed when a VWO test is active. And so in this case, Rover has detected that for a test 233, after a day or so, there's not enough information available, which makes it likely that the test isn't triggering correctly. And that is something that's really useful to have, because as Thom said, if you only notice this after multiple days or even multiple weeks, you've wasted a lot of time, possibly a lot of money. It's an issue. And we could also expand Rover to have him notify you of experiments where one of the variants appears to be performing rather badly. He can make some comparisons to the control and other variants. And that way it's just easier to interrupt quickly. The only thing here is that what we don't want Rover to do is give like automated updates on how different variants are performing, because you do need a lot of data for this, and we don't want to make him send out notifications prematurely because it doesn't really work that way. Tom, how do you see this?
Yeah, checking continuously on experiments how they're doing is something that we see very often as clients, but something that you shouldn't do. Before you start an experiment, you have to calculate the number of visitors that need to be in your experiment before you can call the experiment or the results of the experiment significant. And if you start to continually peak every day, then the chance is very high that you're going to make the wrong decision based on that experiment, because you've been checking the results of the tests. Statistically, you really shouldn't be doing that, which is also why we haven't, even though it's really easy, we didn't make the feature that it would check the results every day and calculate the conversion lift and push that to Slack, because yeah, it shouldn't be part of an optimization culture.
No, and it's something that people are very interested in learning about, but it's just not a good thing to do, and we don't feel that a notifier like Rover should be used as a platform for that. So what I hope that we've kind of been able to show during this webinar is just that Rover is really a supporting element. He doesn't really replace anyone within the team, but he does take a special role within your team. So what we noticed with Rover was that he really became one of us, like one of the team. It's very fun to see how something that is in reality not more than a bunch of lines of code, yeah, just to really be part of an organization and really be part of something that you do. And it's also very interesting to think that if there are expansions to the VWO API, for example, or if there are other services where power could be derived from, it's very easy to plug those in. And especially now that Rover is also conversational, that you are able to interact with them, it's just a very cool project to have worked on. And I think many organizations would benefit from having something like Rover on board, or even just utilizing the API beyond reporting purposes. Yeah. I think that kind of wraps it up for me. Tom, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think yeah. When you were talking about the fun part, it's really important that when you're creating and sending all these notifications to everyone, that you shouldn't make a system that's going to be ignored right away because it's just because it doesn't have personality. it sounds really strange, but in the time that we used Rover, we really looked at each notification, because we also build in some randomness what Rover would say, which means that we're more engaged with the notifications, and we were really up to date on what the other colleagues in the optimization team were doing, which meant that yeah, we definitely had a more effective optimization program.
Yeah, that's definitely true, because the risk of sending a lot of notifications is just everything getting ignored straight away or it getting boring. And we hope that through adding this persona to Rover, so not making him just a generic notifying bot, that will really connect to people. And I guess that what we've seen is that actually happens. So that's also something to keep in mind.
Yep.
And I think that's mostly it on our side. Very curious to hear what you guys want to ask us. If there's anything extra that you'd like to know.
Thank you, Gino and Tom, for this wonderful session. And I found a few key use cases very, very interesting, especially where you guys talked about the quizzes and also the QA part. Because working with so many customers over the years, I've realized that a lot of people are usually stuck at the QA stage as well. So we, on a daily basis, we get a lot of queries around their test not being able to run, where they've done something wrong during the setup. And I feel all these automations where you're able to QA your test right there before starting can really help you be more productive. And at the same time, in terms of collaboration, I felt that the quiz part was really interesting, and I've never really seen anybody do something similar to sort of keep the entire team engaged and sort of collaborate to run great test. So I think it was a wonderful session. Thanks a lot. And we'll quickly take up questions. So we have a lot of questions. So let me take the first question. So this is an interesting question from Paul. He says, how did you get the inspiration to build Rover? So Tom, you want to take that up, and then probably Gino, you can also add in here.
Well, I think because Gino built Rover and he had the idea, I think he's the one to answer this one, and I'll add if it's necessary.
Yeah, I think I'll take this one. So I think already at a younger age, I was kind of interested in these chatbots. Back when MSN was still a thing, and I was in high school, I was like working on little bots that you could play games with and such. And so I think the inspiration to integrate virtual assistants or chatbots into my work has always been there. And I think just in the case of Rover, it also happened rather naturally because we were doing a lot of these notifications manually. And we also had some struggles with that. And we noticed that when we weren't doing the notifications, for example, if somebody else was publishing tests or doing modifications, that it was difficult to keep everybody up to date. So then to me, it seemed kind of natural to automate that. And also having worked on several other automations just within the digital marketing scope, it seemed natural to combine the two. And that's how the idea for Rover was born, really.
Perfect. Thank you, Gino, for that answer. I think I have a similar question from Brian, and he wants to understand that usually people go for an IT project management tool to manage their optimization program. Then how does your sort of, you also mentioned that you are using Jira. So how does Jira and Rover work together?
I think they complement each other here. So Jira is really a project management platform, and I think for the purposes that we have here, it could be a bit much. And I think the notifications within Jira also work a little differently. So I just think that Rover makes it very accessible to be in the loop on what is happening around tests, and also to automate that part and to add that personality to it, as we described earlier, which you don't really have with Jira. If you're anything like us, you probably get dozens of Jira notifications in a day, and it's easy to overlook them, and some are a bit time sensitive, like when tests go live, and that's not something that you want to miss. So we use them in conjunction with each other. So Jira is the place where we do all the management for the tests, and where we assign different roles, and where we have it moved to the Kanban board. And then when it comes to everything that's surrounding the actual publication of the test, and then the initial results for that, that's kind of where Rover steps in. So I think that where you want to keep that is really a matter of preference. But in this case, the way that we have Rover set up and the way I see it, it's more a complement of our existing project management.
All right. Thank you for the answer. We have another question from Alice. She wants to understand that Rover must have taken a lot of development time as well. So how did you convince the stakeholders to invest into building something like a rover?
Yeah, I'll answer it, I guess. Yeah, it definitely cost a bit of development time, but we were really convinced about the power of such a tool, and the structure of Rover. So it uses Slack and uses VWO and uses Google Analytics and Jira. It's a stack of tools that we see at other clients as well. So we knew that we weren't developing it for just one client. We know that we were making it for multiple clients, and yeah, that convinced us to do it. Gino, you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I think on the client side, it was very easy to get started on Rover because it was just apparent that the QA was difficult to control without automations. And I think it was just easier. It's easier to convince somebody of the use of such an elaborate project if it is actually going to immediately solve a problem. And so our problem was that it's difficult to keep everybody in the loop. We have some QAing that gets more difficult, and that we would also have to spend increasing amounts of time on. And so in a way, that has really helped us just to prove the value of Rover as well. And then, as Tom said, being able to roll him out for multiple clients to keep the cost low for just one, that worked out.
And of course, we didn't build it in one day. We built it as we went. We didn't. Yeah, so we didn't have to spend a lot of time up front, but we spread it out over a couple of months to do this. And we also already have some experience doing this because we also build a lot of dashboards and do a lot of data orchestration. And over there, we also connect with various APIs and do error handling and stuff. So we're kind of familiar with this kind of activities. So that made it, as Gino said, very natural to think of a solution like this.
Makes sense. So I'll quickly take up another question from Jesse. The question is, the Roverbot includes a connection to IBM Watson for NLP. Can you please explain how the NLP is playing a role here?
Sorry, how do you NLP?
So Gino, you want to take that up? So
yeah, sure. So
you want to understand the role of NLP in Rover.
Yeah, so what we really wanted to do to make him interactive was we wanted people to be able to have some communication with him. And so the communication with him isn't that complex, but we didn't want to just hard code a set list of commands to him and then have people speak those exactly, because otherwise he wouldn't be able to pick up on that. And so around that time, Watson was just something that was brought to my attention. I thought it would be interesting to just experiment with that. And I think I had used Watson on a previous project once before, but that was more experimental. And so here what I really like about using Watson is that it makes it easy to just set up the dialogues that you can have with the bot that you are creating, and also that it's easy to extract kinds of information from what is being said. And so what we really see that being used in Rover is, for example, the test IDs. So it makes it really easy to work with those and then take actions based on that. And because you can do that in a relatively safe way, it was just a good fit.
Thank you so much, Gino, for the answer. I think we've already crossed the time. So one final question, what is the future for Rover? So this question is addressed to both of you. So I think if both of you could give your last words around, the future plans for Rover.
While developing Rover, we made a roadmap document where we listed all the different features that we wanted to add. So there's a list of very interesting features that we want to discover if it's possible to pull off. Also, when the VWO API has some more options in the future, then we'll also look at that to integrate it. So yeah, I think Rover won't be the same in a few years' time.
No, exactly. I think Rover is only going to get smarter. So I think that would be very interesting to see how we can fit more AI into that, for example. I think its basic functionality will remain the same, but it has the potential to evolve into something much bigger. And because it's built fairly modular, we could also add other platforms into there that could be interesting to us that we are not really considering now. So I think that's really where Rover will go, just to grow his importance within the team, and sky's the limit, really.
Makes sense. So I think, we've already crossed the time. And thank you again, Gino and Thom, for, enlightening all of us with such wonderful use cases, which I'm sure, most people have never heard before. And to everyone, who's joined the webinar, thanks a lot for attending this webinar. We will take up rest of the questions offline over an email, and we'll ensure we'll answer to all your questions. And feel free to shoot any questions to VWO on Twitter, and we will ensure that we answer to all these questions. Thanks again, everybody, for joining, and we'll end the webinar now. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rahul, for hosting us, and bye, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for hosting us.
Thank you.